going?
Cool.
And yeah, feel free to
move around and yeah, cool.
Don't trip anybody.
Get the fins. All right. Who's sick? Yeah, big crowd. We got it. Yeah, dude.
Hopefully everybody dressed up properly because Andy's live streaming this right now.
Alright guys, does everybody want to get started?
Yeah, already.
Okay, so my name's Andy. I've probably met almost every one of you, so it's great to see everybody. Tonight we're doing part of a free windsurfing clinic series, which has been put on by Makani fins. Round of applause. These guys have been putting a lot of stoke and energy into making things really cool down here for this Hatteras Spring. So yeah, it's great that they're able to pull some of their team riders from all over the world and bring them here to help everybody enjoy windsurfing a little bit more. Tonight's topic is speed. So chances are maybe some of you guys left your friends at home. But anyway, I'm going to let Tyson and Wyatt and the Makani guys take care of all that stuff. But since I have all of your attention, the register is open tonight if you guys want to purchase stuff. And we're going to do a little special where 10% of all the sales tonight go to the Hatteras Island Rescue Squad, which are the volunteer folks who drive the jet skis around and save you when you get hurt out in the middle of the sound. And the other 10% is going to go to a local food pantry. So the more you spend, the more you're helping out everybody. So take those wallets out. So without further ado, I might as well mention also, we've got Graham over here holding a really odd and that's a very special homemade rig, which is broadcasting live to the internet tonight.
It's pretty sweet.
And so hopefully none of you guys mind if your faces are exposed to the World Wide Web.
And you finish this with a pole then?
Yeah. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you guys to a few people who are here right now, and we're really lucky to have some great people around. First, we've got Tyson Poor. Tyson, why don't you take a second to do some shameless plugs?
Oh man. I ride for JP and Neil Pride, sails and boards. I ride for Dakine. Pleasure Ground eyewear, Makani fins, of course, which is helping me really improve. The last 3 years, I've been getting into slalom pretty heavy, and been working with these guys hard on trying to make a competitive but cheap slalom fin. So this is actually what we've come up with over the last 2 years of going back and forth from Canada, being down in Mexico. For our, we also run a business down in Mexico, Pro Windsurf La Ventana. So non-stop online with these guys, sending photos back and forth and saying this looks good, that looks bad. Let's try and figure stuff out. So
cool.
Yeah.
We also are lucky enough to have Wyatt Miller with us, and now it's your chance to do some shameless
plugs. I'm riding Nash gear, board, sails, mast, boom, spaces. Love it. And then the Makani boys, been doing tons of prototype testing with these guys. Louis got this cool CAD programs where you can like share screens. So me and Tyson will be down there at Baja sharing screens with Louis in some really freezing cold place up north. Rotate the fins all around. Like, no, a little bit more off there. Okay, break it back. No, not like that. Come on, like this one. It's super fun working with these guys. But yeah, I'm all Nash rider, and we both ride Dakine. What else we got another eyewear. I got Kane on eyewear.
And Yingling.
And Yingling. Yingling is not good. You guys keep buying Yingling, and he keeps buying Yingling. Everybody's making fun of me.
Well, there's good yarn there, too.
I see.
So we're also lucky enough to have with us tonight the editor of Windsports magazine. And there's somebody else. There she is. Sam Bittner is here as well. Sam Bittner deserves a huge round of applause. Sam, if you guys don't know who Sam is the organizer of the American Windsurfing Tour, which has exploded rapidly in the last 2 years, and it's providing a lot of stoke for local windsurfing all across the country. And apparently there's some big news.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we added a Peru event today.
Where?
Yeah, so we're going to Peru and Pacasmayo in August.
Isn't that like the longest left in the world?
It is, yes. The 26th. So that's really exciting, but even more right on the plate is Santa Cruz in 2 weeks from today.
Today.
Yeah, Santa Cruz, Goya, Windsurfing.
Yeah, when's the contest down here?
September 12th through the 15th in Hatteras. It'll be our first AWT event in Hatteras, our first AWT event on the East Coast.
T-minus
how many weeks?
5 months.
September 12th.
Okay, so just one last thing while I have everybody's attention, and then I'll set these guys free. This is a temporary location for us. In like a week or maybe 2, I don't know, we're going to be moving to that brand new building right next door. So next time you're down, if you can't find us, that's where we went. Just like 20 feet that way. Otherwise, let's give all these guys a big round of applause, and then we'll get started.
All right, so we're just going to go over speed on how to tune your board, tune your sail properly, proper stance, what fins to get, depending on how fast you want to go. This is for when your buddy is sailing by you every time, flying in front of you, and you're just getting more and more angry because you can't go as fast as him. It's not necessarily because you aren't at the same ability. It might just be tuning your board or your sail just a little bit differently, and then you can be the guy waving at him every time you go flying by. So first we're going to start with the board. Boards over the years have changed. They're getting a lot shorter and a lot fatter, and they're still able to handle the big sails, the high speed, keeping the nose down. They don't need to be the 15-foot long, skinny guns that they used to make to go flying across the water. You can see like this board, the boards now that you ride like a 7.0, 7.8, 8.6, 9.5. They're getting a lot wider than they used to be until you step up to like a formula board, which is all pretty much a basic 100 centimeters wide, but shorter and fatter. So what we're having to do is move, we'll go over foot straps first, is move yourself as far out on the rail as you can get, depending on your foot size. So if you have big feet or a high arch on your feet, that's also going to depend on where you want your foot strap. So start out with the back foot strap. For max speed, if you got everything set up right, we're going to want the back foot strap as far back as you can get it. You want to have everything over that fin, because when you're flying along at that top speed, only from about the front foot straps to the tail of the board is in the water, and it's skipping across, so you really want a lot of control just on top of that fin. So we're going to move the straps all the way back. There used to be a common rule where you take, it's about a shoulder width is your fingertips to your elbow. You take your elbow and put it in the middle of the back strap and right where your fingertips end up. So on this one, the back strap or the front strap can come back. You want the middle of your fingers or your fingertips to be dead center in the middle of that front strap. That doesn't necessarily, on some boards it's working now, but they're making the boards so short and with actual wider stances to have more control over the fin. Can't really go by that basic rule anymore. A lot of people are still going by the old school, how many hand distances is it back, so that it's like how far you're going to move the mast track forward, whatnot. Kind of got to throw that out the window right now, and we're just going to move everything as far back and as far out as we can. Front strap is going to be a little different. If you have a high arch, you can't necessarily move that front strap all the way to the outside, because then your heel is going to be dragging in the water. You're not going to be able to fit it in there. But front strap, you want to try and get everything as far out and as far back as possible, because we're trying to ride that fin and trying to keep that upwind rail down in the water. The whole time the board's riding, it's wanting to snap over. So the farther out we can get and keep that rail in the water, the faster we're going to be going. Foot strap tightness, you don't want, it depends again on how big, how high your arch is, how big your feet are. I like to ride with my front strap, the strap right on the knuckles of my foot. So right where your toes end, just there, because that's where I can get the most torque pulling down on that, or pulling up on that strap. Pulling up on the strap with my front foot is essentially putting heel pressure into the board and starting to bring that rail back down into the water. So it depends on the size of your foot again, but that's where I get the most torque out of that strap, is to get that strap right on my knuckles. My back strap, I'm not pulling up as hard with my foot, so I'm actually trying to keep my foot as flat as possible and actually gripping that board. So I'm going to ride the strap a little bit higher up on my foot. Yeah, a little bit, the back strap a little more loose, so I can keep direct contact with that board. I'm never really lifting up with my front foot. Your stance, slalom-wise, and I'll go over the reason why your front foot comes up or down and how to fix that, but back foot is normally going to be drilled down really hard, toes touch it. You're not pushing across the board, but you want to get as much contact with that back foot on the board as you can. And front foot, depending on how fast you're going and how over or underpowered you are, is either going to be pulling up really hard on the board or just lightly. Your front foot, for max speed, is never going to be comfortably sitting in the strap. That's why you feel that at that high speed, your shins start to burn after you're going for a distance. So that's actually a good sign. It means that your stuff is rigged properly.
So back foot's a little bit looser and the front foot strap's a little tighter?
Yeah. So your foot can get in a little bit farther. Front foot is a little bit tighter because you're putting a lot more torque up on that front foot. And that all depends on like this board, you can see on this side the pad doesn't come all the way down to the bottom of the rail. So you're going to have to adjust where your foot comes into the strap. There's a starboard over there where the pad goes a little bit farther down the rail. So the farther out on the rail you can get your heels, the more control you're going to have over that board. So with this, your foot might not even be on the pad, it might be on this smooth section of the board. But yeah, play with that as far out as you can get it and as far back.
And now, if you were racing, or you were doing freestyle, or you're sharing a board with your wife,
yeah.
which one would you use?
So here's the thing. Whatever
she says.
Good answer. Racing is, you want the ease of getting in and out of the straps as fast as possible. So when you're coming out of a jibe on a mark, you want your foot to release nice and easy out of the strap and be able to put it straight into the other side without, because the straps on that front are going to be usually a little bit tighter, you don't want to have to wiggle your foot in. You want to, once your foot gets in there, set in the strap, it should be as far in as it can go, and you should have nice pressure. So these, we call them slims. They're not very, the more speed you get into, the less comfortable everything's going to be. It's like a high-performance car, right? So it's not going to be that luxurious ride that goes over bumps all really smooth and everything. So these are not necessarily the most cushy straps, but when you're flying along and you've got your foot jammed in that front strap, you step out and you go through the jibe, and you go to take your foot out, and all this fabric moves around, and your foot kind of sticks in the strap. That's when stuff goes bad really fast.
That's when you get caught in your strap in the middle of a jibe, and falling is not the fastest way to turn.
So that's why for racing you use the slims. They're awesome straps. I mean, I like them a lot. The races only last for a little bit, so it's not like you're non-stop in and out of the straps. They've improved them a lot. They started to wrap them with the fabric on the underside so they don't tear up your feet anymore.
What about for freestyle?
Freestyle, that's up to you. It's personal preference with these two.
But me and Tyson both use these regular Makani Primos for freestyle. I find that they cut your feet up the least, even when you're sailing 8 hours a day for months and months on end. These ones, I used to have giant volcanoes on the top of my feet where you get the pressure of the strap causes a volcano on the top of your feet, and these Makani Primos made them go away for sure.
But my buddy Brian loves these. They're a little more cushy, more bulky, so you got to get your foot in there. It's more like a wakeboard kind of strap or kiteboard strap, but it's a little bit more bulky, but it touches more of the top of your foot, so it's a little bit more forgiving.
It's also a lot easier to adjust. You can kind of just pull this one and it releases, and some kind of tightens by notches, so you can feel each notch going. So if you're sharing a board with somebody, or a lot of our boards in our rental center, we have these so people can easily change their foot straps really quick and efficiently. But really, if there was two pieces of equipment that you should really buy more often, it's those YY pads, because they're great. But also foot straps. The worst two things me and Tyson ever see when we're teaching lessons is the guy who comes to a lesson and his boom is either at his belly button or his foot straps are like, there's no more of this like covering on it anymore. It's like just
duct tape around it.
Duct tape around it. It's like just this plastic part, and like he's like going through $50 pairs of booties left and right because he has to wear booties because his foot straps are so gnarly. Or you got the old foot straps where this is all torn up and there's pieces hanging down, so when you go to put your foot in the foot strap, you can't quite get your toe past it. So, two cheapest and most really cushy, awesome pieces of windsurfing gear: foot straps and YY pads. Make a ton of difference, especially if you're going to be racing, trying to go fast. You need to be able to have something somewhat comfortable.
Yeah. The faster you go, the more uncomfortable everything gets. So yeah, some foot straps. Anybody have any questions on any of that back here? So we'll go up to the mast base. The older boards, it used to be the more powered you got, the more you throw that mast base in the front. Now you're really only adjusting. So depending on which sail I'm using, between like a 7.0, 7.8, 8.6, 6.2, there's a sweet spot for each one of those sails on your board. You really only adjust it maybe a ½ inch forward or a ½ inch back, depending on how the board is riding. What's really making the board rise up out of the water, the nose come up out of the water or down, is the fin you're using. So if you're over fin, the board as far forward as you want to jam this to keep that nose down in the water, the faster you get going. What that's also going to do is start to make the board want to snap over on its side. So you're still going to be using that same amount of pressure on your front foot to keep that board down in the water. What you really need to do is just change your fin. So go from a 38 or whatever you're using that day, a 38 to a 36. And then you can bring that mast drag back to that sweet spot where the board actually gets the most speed out of it, and you're doing the least amount of work. There's a couple things with the mast track, so you want to start with it forward. Not all the way to the front, but start with it forward. If your sail's rigged properly, you got the right fin in there. We're going to start with it forward, and you're going to move it back. Keep moving it back until you can take your front foot. So the farther forward it is, the more you're going to be cranking up on that front foot. You're really going to feel the burn in your shins on your front foot. We're going to start moving that back until we can actually start to lower your toes, bring your toes back down onto the board. You're still pulling up a little bit on that strap, but it's not like you're doing it the entire time to keep the rail in the water. You'll realize when it gets too far back, when that foot gets comfortable, but the nose is now starting to flutter out of the water. So you got the right size fin in there, you got the right size sail. You're playing around with this. Once that nose starts to flutter out of the water, that means you've got it too far back. So we're going to take it and just barely move it. That's the one pain about racing, is that you have to go for one reach out, one reach back, and adjust something. Fix something on your stuff, and so that you know why everything is doing what it does. If you go out and sail a whole day and you're like, oh, it's an 18-knot day, you're on this sail and this board, it's perfect. Come out the next day and something's wrong. It's not a different wind direction or different water. You just got to play around with your gear a little bit more. So find that sweet spot for your 7/8 or whatever sail it is that you love on this board, and draw a circle or a line on your board and write 7/8 perfect or something, or 7/8 plus, which means this is where I put it when I'm overpowered. This is where I put it when I'm underpowered. So you have a starting point with those sails. So each sail is going to be a little bit different, so you're going to have a couple. I just have 3 different colored Sharpies on my board, so I know the blue is this sail, the green is this sail, the black is that sail, and I know that's the sweet spot. If it's a little windier, I'm going to move it forward. If it's a little less windy, I'm going to move it back. The reason for moving it back and forward is, again, to get that first the comfort with your front foot, but to get the nose up and out of the water at the proper distance. You really want to be riding for full speed, the board in the water no farther forward than your front foot. You can feel this by when the board hits, if you're at that max speed and you feel it fluttering across the top of the water. When a piece of chop hits at about where the mast jack is, it's just a little bit of you call it biting. The board slows down just a tiny bit. And that's a fine, really, really fine adjustment with the mast track, maybe forward a centimeter or back a centimeter, and you can get that board to ride perfectly to where it never bites. And it's at that max speed, riding just on the tail, just on the fin, and bombing across the water.
So like one of the biggest thing we was talking about earlier is you got to change stuff for going fast. Like if you just go to the beach and you set your rig up and you go sailing, not going to help you fine-tune and figure out what is the fastest. You really need to go out sailing and be like, okay, well, it feels a little sluggish, it feels like it's biting, maybe it's not going too fast. Then you need to actually come in after 2 runs, and you may have to come all the way up on land to move your mast base back. But if you move it all the way back, and now you're going super fast, you're like, whoa, this is way more fun, the wind comes up a little bit, all of a sudden your tail walking, have a hard time keeping it down, that means you should move it a little bit further forward. But same thing with the boom going up and down. You can't really get faster unless you decide to come in and change things so you feel differences. You can't really feel differences like one day to the next. You really need to, in one session, come in a bunch of times. Even if you're like, okay, I have no idea what to do. Come in, move your mast base all the way back.
Change one thing.
Yeah, one thing.
So don't come in and change your fin and throw the mast jack forward and change the height of the boom, because that's going to make everything ride completely different again. Just come in, change the fin, and then go out for a run. If it feels good, then it's fine. That was the problem. If it doesn't feel all right, then work off of what you just went with the fin, and now try just changing another thing. It makes it so much more comfortable once you find that sweet spot instead of fighting everything. Your sessions last twice as long because you're gaining speed, but you're also gaining control over the rig, so you don't use nearly as much energy while you're flying along.
You got to change stuff in one session. That's key.
Yeah, so anybody have any questions on the board?
You guys are talking a lot about moving the mast around. I think most of the people here probably have much less sorted out gear. One of the things I hear a lot of people talking about is they don't have the right fin. They're not you don't have the right fin for the sail. And how do you decide what is the right fin for your sail?
So there's a
because none of that will make any difference. The moving the mast around an inch.
exactly if you have the wrong fin. So each sail, depending on the width of your board, so the size board that you're using. So I ride a 112 liter. It's 68 wide, and for that on a 7.0, my 40 centimeter fin is the max I will go, and that's underpowered on a 7.0. So I'll ride from that's for max speed. It's not for pointing upwind or downwind or anything. That's just blasting back and forth across the water. So I'll ride 36 to 38. 36 is really small. It's on the small side for a board that's
so
that
how
wide.
do you know when it's time to go from your 40 to your 38?
The board starts to flutter, and you can't, just by moving the mast track forward, the board will still, you might keep the nose down, but your foot is still cranking because you're over-finned, and that board wants to snap. The whole time you're sailing, that the fin is bent underneath you, right? Because you're putting pressure across the board. You can't overpower it and get it to come back. It's wanting to it's overpowering you. And every time you sheet in on the sail and try and pick up your max speed, the board, the nose isn't riding, but the rail really wants to snap over.
Pushing super hard.
Okay. My board doesn't work like that. I get spin out. Can you tell me a little bit about spin? I don't have a board quite like that. So, So what about spin out? I sort of feel like when I'm spinning out, I either have my sail too far back or I have too small a fin.
You could have, so you could have too small a fin, or it could be too soft of a fin. Fins lose their integrity after a lot of use. So even G10, these are G10 with carbon, so they're going to stay stiffer a lot longer. But if you look at any basic G10 fin, like Maui Tectonics I've used, and they lose, after a year, they lose their stiffness, and they're not made, those fins aren't designed, they're made out of essentially a block of fiberglass, G10, and it's not made to twist, it's just made to bend. So those fins, the softer they get, the more they're bending, and it's not uniformly twisting off like the tip of a sail. If the whole tip just flopped off, the wind's not really bleeding off of it properly and making a smooth exit. It's the same with a fin. So the softer it gets, the more it's actually just bending, and it's not allowing the water to flow off it properly. Louis could probably describe that a little bit more with the...
Yeah, I can. What I can say also is this fin, that's why we decided to put like carbons in it. So we call it G10 carbons. So just what Tyson explained, he just said maybe with G10 compared to carbon fins, sometime after a while, 1 year use or two, that your fin is getting loose a little bit. So when you're going upwind, you morally with this flex, you're going to get fin out. So that's why we try to put carbons on it just to keep the fin longer, actually.
So for speed, you never want a soft fin?
Not necessarily. It depends on, you can get into the fins that are $1,000 a fin that are custom laid carbon to make it twist with stringers in it that go all different directions, so that, you can get away with a softer fin because the tip of the fin is actually flexing off with the curve of the water, where instead of uniformly flexing off. But then you get into the $700-800 price range for a fin this size. It's just and that's just for one of them. So if the fin's too big, you're kind of screwed.
It's about like a uniform twist. When it's when it's thicker, it twists less. As it gets thinner, it twists more. And that's when it's nice, and stiff in its normal form. But once, you've cranked on it. When you're riding a big enough fin like this, like Tyson's saying, it's literally cranked under your body, and it's the fact that it wants to snap back that's pushing up on the board and giving you lift. So the whole time you're riding, when you look at the guys on the formula boards, like, the thing is bowed under them like crazy, and you can only really do so much of that before it gets soft and starts to, it doesn't twist as much as it bends, it just bends. And so that's what's going to give you some spin out, but usually it's
if you're too small a fin on too big a board, I can't remember what all the old school guys in the gorge come up and they try and give you all these old techniques. They'd measure a foot up from the tail of the board, put a dot down there, and then measure the distance from rail to rail, straight off of that dot. So that's the biggest size fin that you would use on that board. So this is way too small, yeah. So it'd be, I think it was a foot. So even this, you could go a lot bigger than you could go 44, 48. You could go 54 on this just because of the width of the board. I don't know how to measure too small. You'll feel too small. You'll just spin out. You can't. And that also goes with sail size. You got, if you're pumping up sail size, you got to go bigger fin along with that.
And also a lot of like the spinning out. When you're talking about people spinning out a lot, we kind of talked about in our last clinic how it's not just a lot of people. I mean, as we're windsurfing, we're pushing a ton on that fin against the surface area of that fin with the back foot. But a lot of people forget that they need to be pushing forward and driving down their toes with their front foot also. And so we were saying in the last clinic, like, so many times you'll look at somebody sailing and we'll be teaching, and the nose will be too high, and you can just tell the guy's sailing all back-footed, and he's not giving any forward drive to the board with his front foot. Whereas you see a guy like Tyson he can windsurf with that much fin and still be fine because he's going to drive all the way to his front foot. But you never teach a lesson, ever, where you look at a guy sailing and you say he's sailing too much with his front foot. Never happens. So we all, as windsurfers, have a tendency to push really hard and concentrate on just pushing on that back foot, and we forget to push forward with that front foot. So if I'm going to sail a fin that's that big, a 3-inch fin, which Tyson was last year sailing around, and I've sailed a few times.
Wasn't really helping the sail.
A broken 3-inch fin. But he can do that by not pushing really at all on the back foot, just on that front foot. And so if you're spinning out a ton as just a normal sailing, you feel like you've got a big enough fin, 9 times out of 10 it's because you're just completely concentrating against pushing with the back foot, and you're failing to give drive to that front foot and hang down your mast base to give mast base pressure. You can't just drive on this back foot. That's why this front foot strap is pointed forward. You got to be pushing forward on that front foot strap too. And anytime you do spit out, the way you get rid of spin out is by hanging your weight in your sail and doing one quick hard jerk under your butt with your back foot to shed those bubbles. You can either turn downwind, which is a little bit slower, but hopefully you should be able to get your weight in the sail and just do a quick hard yank under your butt with that back foot and shed a lot of those bubbles. But when we have a lot of lessons and guys are just spinning out, usually you'll also notice the nose is riding pretty high because the person is just forcing against that back foot and not driving forward the front foot also.
Yeah, if I can maybe add something. You have to understand that the push of the sail goes like this, and then the fin it goes the other way around. So that's why when you're over fin, that's why the board goes like this instead of and starts going like this, and then you lose control. Then take a smaller fin, and then the board will just stick on the water after.
Yeah, but usually spinning out is too small a fin, really old soft fin, or not giving enough front foot pressure and just being too back foot dominant for sure. And yanking under your butt quickly is key to kind of ditching those bubbles. And anytime you jump, kind of one of the things we learn is anytime you take a jump and you land pointing more upwind than you took off, you're going to cavitate and spin out. So when we all jump and we get better at jumping, we learn that we need to turn upwind to jump, and we need to extend our front hand in the air, point our toes like a ballerina to expose the bottom of the board to the wind, and those two things will cause the nose and the board to turn downwind. And if we land pointing more downwind than we took off, we won't spin out, pretty much as a rule. Right, Ty?
Yeah.
Any other questions on pins, boards, foot straps? Honestly, foot straps, you guys, everybody deserves a new pair of foot straps. They're great stocking stuffers. Easter egg hunt. Halloween candy.
Yeah, so you can get away with 3 fins for depending on what you want to say. If you just have one board, 3 fins should work. You don't need to go 42, 40, 38, 36. You can jump 36 to 40 to 44, depending on what you want to sail. If you're going to go for upwind sailing, go bigger. So go maybe even 4 or 6 centimeters bigger than you normally go. But yeah, 3 fins. Fins are just as important as sails are for a board. So everybody has their favorite board with 3 sails that go along with it. Those 3 sails are brand new, $400 a piece, $500 a piece. The fins can make one board and one sail. You can get, it's almost like owning another sail, or owning that 2 square meters bigger if you just have a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller fin. It's a cheaper way than buying 2 more sails.
When you do sailing the sound with all the sandbars and everything, 48 centimeter fin.
Yeah, so that's really going with these. The surface area on this is a 43, but if you look at the 48, it's got more. It's just the way that it's measured. So coming down on a weed fin, this is a 38, and a 48 have almost the same amount of surface area. So you're going to get the same lift and drive out of it, but it's measured differently. So it comes, you're measuring from here to here on the fin. Yep. So, whoa, just fell out. But yeah, so you can get away with a shorter fin that's got, you don't need that 48. So that's another benefit of weed fins. You can head into more shallow water.
These guys got a pretty good fin size, fin type to board chart going on the website. I mean, it's kind of hard to say, Tyson, what do you use on your 100-liter board? Well, he uses 16 centimeter fin on his freestyle 100-liter board, and his 92-liter slalom board you use.
Like a 38. So it's completely different depending on what you're going, depending on what you want to do, speed-wise, wave-wise, whatever. It's all different. Fins are huge to have.
They're huge.
In your quiver. They improve your everything. They make your board work properly. Your session's longer. But
especially
saltwater versus freshwater thinning wise.
I haven't really. I haven't experienced much difference. With speed wise, with freestyle, yes, they do break loose. It seems like in freshwater a little bit easier. So you can get that second spin out of a move, or if you're carving hard with that freestyle fin in freshwater, they seem to break loose easier than they do in saltwater. Slalom-wise, I haven't felt much of a difference. The only time I've felt difference is current. So the fin's not lifting the way it properly should because the water's moving in a different direction. But other than that, I haven't. Have you?
I sort of felt like a little longer here in the saltwater.
Yeah, you can feel a little more pressure.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I just feel like I need a little bit more fin in the saltwater than I do in the freshwater.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, yeah, that could have a lot of reasons. That
could have to do with the bottom too, I suppose. Or shallow water.
That makes
it's because you float more on salt water actually than regular water because of the salt.
Sorry,
So
what you do it?
yeah, the water is different. You float more on. You can use a smaller board in salt water than regular water. So that makes a difference. That's why you change the fins. That's true. That makes a difference.
And as far as like
Density,
speed, when you don't have a slalom board, like when you're looking for speed in a board, generally a flatter rocker line in the tail. So if the tail is bottom shape, if the tail is flatter, it's going to be a faster board. If you're taking a bunch of boards here in the shop and you're lining them up edge on edge like this, and you kind of look down at the tail, the one with the generally with the flatter rocker is going to be a little bit faster than the one with more rocker. More rocker is more of a wave board for turning. Flatter rocker, like a free ride board or a slalom board or a freestyle board, is going to be a little bit faster. So I'm just in the shop trying to compare which one is going to be faster.
one that looks
more
like a plank.
The plank, which is playing a little bit more.
Will you use the same fin for a 5.0 and 9.0 fin?
No. So that depends on what you're going for, but you don't use. You're getting something completely different. The pressure that the 9.0 puts down on the board, at the nose of the board, you're not getting the proper lift. Boards all ride differently depending on the fin, so you're going to rig your board and sail differently. Like the starboards here take forever to get the nose out, so you're going to run it back. So you're not going to ride on a 9.0. You're not going to be able to get the full performance out of the board with the same size fin. It depends. If you're using the fin that you use for a 5.0 with the 9.0, it's not going to work properly. If you use like I tried to do a couple lessons on my slalom board like this with a big fin, but with my 5.0, and it doesn't ride properly. It wants there's not enough pressure no matter how far forward you can put the mast base to keep the nose down, the board wants to snap over it, it just doesn't work.
So the sail is also part of the equation.
Yeah, and we're going to go over that in the...
Yeah, actually, this is a good point maybe to take a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back and talk about rig stuff.
Sounds good.
So during the break, bear in mind that the register's open and 10% is going to Hatters on the Rescue Squad, another 10% is going to the
And
food
think
pantry.
deeply about your fish trap.
I also want to point out that there's a beautiful orange board in the corner there. It's a Taboo Dock Curve 85. That board is available as part of a raffle prize. And if you guys want to buy tickets, they're $10, and the proceeds are going to go to these two glorious guys here. I think.
That's good.
So if you guys want in on that, the drawing's going to be at Windfest, which is next Friday, Saturday down at Frisco Woods Campground.
But you don't have to be there because Andy will ship it anywhere.
So,
He loves to ship.
See him with those tape guns.
yes.
Always have to be on weekends.
Yeah.
I mean, most people here, as soon as they call down here, we use everywhere.
Yeah.
I can't even use a point of
Still go? Yeah, dude. Dude, we got 8 at one point.